I'm Natalie Walton, and this is Imprint, a podcast about creating a home and life you love. Each week, I'm here to share with you some of the biggest lessons I've learned during my career and life. Some of them I wish I'd learned a lot sooner because they would have saved me a huge amount of time, stress, and even money. Many of these ideas could have accelerated my journey as a creative and business owner. I also feature interviews with inspiring creatives, entrepreneurs, and experts to help you focus on what's most important in your life. Today, I'm going to interview interior stylist Michelle Halford of The Design Chaser. Before we start today's episode, I'm excited to announce that my best-selling course, The Styling Masterclass, is now open for enrollment. So if you'd like to learn how to create interiors you love and visual stories that create impact, please come join me and hundreds of students from around the world. I just want to flag though that the premium level has only limited places which sell out really fast. So if you've been waiting for this announcement, I really hate for you to miss out. Just go to nataliewalton.com/The Styling Masterclass, and I can't wait to meet you in the course. Now on with today's interview. Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk to you. I've actually got so many questions to ask you. So I'm just going to dive straight into it because I think there is so much we can talk about today. So first of all, though, I just wanted to start a little bit about your background because you're a bit of an enigma on your Instagram feed. Many people would know you as the Design Chaser. But even though you share, I guess, your home, there's not a lot about you personally in there. And you've obviously a very creative person, and I'm just interested to hear about your background, in particular, like your childhood, where you grew up, and what type of, child you were when you were sort of growing up. Were you a creative child, for instance? So can you just fill us in a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Auckland in New Zealand, and I have two older sisters. I did a lot of ballet growing up. So from about the age of 4, this was a huge part of my life. And as I got older, it became more and more demanding in terms of classes every day, ballet competitions on, every other weekend and during the school holidays, and ballet exams. So it was a really big part of my life. In terms of being artistic, I think that's the side of dance that I really loved. I loved the music and the movement. I was very quick at picking up choreography and I loved performing, but the technical side of it, that probably didn't come so naturally to me. And it's something that I had to really work hard at. But since I've grown up and I've moved into the creative industry, I can see now that there's a lot of similarities between dance and design and what I'm doing now in terms of styling and interiors. They're both, an unspoken art form where you communicate in different ways, but it's about space and composition and lines, balance, placement, rhythm. So it's really interesting that I can see those parallels now that I'm an adult. And obviously, that was a big part of my those formative years and growing up and becoming creative. I do believe that.
Yeah, and what about your parents? Were they creative at all, or
Um,
what kind of
the
home did you grow up in as well?
Wow. So my dad was really passionate about um, textiles, actually. So interiors was, I did grow up in that sort of environment. And I remember he had a big, the warehouse and his offices, and he'd say, Michelle, come and have a look at these fabrics that I've just imported. And I guess I didn't really feel that sort of drawn to it at that time. But what's really interesting is that now as an adult and working in this field, I love textiles. I love the tactility of them. I mean, Dad was sort of more into patterns and colours, and I'm very, very neutral. But I do think, that was there. And my mum was incredibly stylish. She always looked, beautiful. She still does. She loves interiors. I definitely see that now, that she has a very, although she didn't work in that industry or anything, she has a very natural eye for interiors, and she's still, loves doing things around the home, and she's done quite a few things recently and asked for my advice, but she doesn't really need it because she has such a great eye, and I can see that I get that from her as well. My There was a lot of musicality in my family. So my uncle was a drummer, my grandfather was a music teacher and pianist, and my great grandfather was the head of the Philharmonic Orchestra. So I feel like that's a big part of with my dancing and music as well. And I think my great grandmother was an artist as well. There's definitely some art there, some art talent there as well in the family. So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So then when you're kind of getting into those teenage years, what did you think that you were going to be when you were growing up? Or what did you have any idea at that sort of stage when you're having to make those decisions, going to, I don't know if you went to university or what you did sort of after school?
Well, it was really ballet. That was the big focus right throughout my teenage years. I, looked up to the older dancers. My mum was really dedicated with ballet, and she would take me to see older dancers perform and compete. And a lot of them would be moving overseas to study because there weren't so many opportunities back then. So that's really what you did. If you were talented and you were dedicated, then you looked at taking your studies overseas. And so I travelled to Australia a couple of times to attend summer schools with other students and just get a feel for it. And then towards the end of my schooling, I started to audition for full time dance schools in Australia. And so that's what I did when I left school. I moved to Melbourne and went to a full time dance school. And I guess with the hopes and dreams of becoming a professional dancer, which that didn't work out that way. I was cut short, unfortunately. I had quite a bad back injury, which I got through that, but I think that it gave me time to reflect on, whether that was really what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And it was a really tough decision, but I decided to come home after a year, and that I was really, really lost at that point because I had put so much focus into one thing, being dancing. And so I really had to think about what I wanted to do with my life, which was really challenging. And so a lot of my friends were studying, so I decided to go down that path. And again, there just weren't a lot of opportunities in terms of dance. So I sort of put that to one side, and I studied. I was really unsure, actually. I found it hard. I studied marketing, and then I switched to business, which in hindsight, those are really good papers to, for what I would be doing in the future. But at the time, I really didn't know what to do. And I decided to change travel and tourism, and I completed that and then worked in the industry for a while. But my heart just was never in it. And I really missed dance and I missed being active. So I got into the gym quite heavily and loved the dance style programs at Les Mills, and was picked out to become an instructor. So I actually studied fitness foundations, which was nutrition, physiology, and anatomy, which I absolutely loved. I still love the body, and I'm really interested in that side of it. And I love teaching. I taught the dance-based programs for probably about 5 years while I was working. But again, that was really quite relentless. It was quite a very busy, active lifestyle, and I still craved doing something creative. I think that was really, I still hadn't found that thing that I loved, and I came to that quite late in life. I ended up working for a magazine publisher. I'd always loved magazines, and that was a turning point for me where I started to become obsessed with interiors. I loved the interior magazines, and it was like a light was switched on at that point. But it was still a few more years before I sort of got into starting up my own blog. I started reading blogs when I left ACP Media and started a family, and I joined Pinterest. So my sister recommended it. She loved it. And she said, she knew that I was a very visual person, creative person. And she said, "Oh, I think you're going to love it." And I did. I found it incredibly addictive. And I started to just create these beautiful boards and hone in on my love of Nordic design. And I couldn't believe how quickly my following grew. And before long,
So this was on Pinterest, was
yeah, so
it?
that's really where I
Yeah.
where I sort of
Okay.
started out. And
Wow.
it was from there that I can't remember in those days. I guess I had over 100,000 followers or something, and I guess that gave me confidence to do something more, but so I was craving a bigger platform where I could put my voice to what I was sharing. And yeah, I think the idea of starting a blog had been brewing for quite some time. And when the kids were little, I thought, now's the time to do it. So I started the Design Chaser, and that's really where it all began for me.
So,
Yeah.
so how long ago was that
So
that
that was in
you started?
2012 that I started the
Okay.
blog. And it was really a place, yeah, just for me to share what I loved. And it became really addictive. I remember just working some sort of crazy hours around, when the kids were little and staying up till 2 in the morning and writing and researching. And my husband thought I was completely mad, but I was determined to make something of it and make something of myself. Um, and yeah, I knew I had to work hard to do that. And then and we decided to build, and that was another sort of turning point because I started to share my ideas for our new home and my mood boards. And then about a year after starting the blog, I joined Instagram. And of course, that was just another whole angle again in terms of sharing my own styling and photography. And things really took off because people loved seeing my ideas come together, I think. Um,
Yeah.
and just there was some great opportunities that came my way. Our house was on the cover of Adore Home magazine in Australia, and I still have my largest following on Instagram is from Australia, which is interesting. It's very global, but yeah, that's where things really started to take off for me. And yeah,
Can I just ask you then?
sure.
So, okay, so you said that you started with Pinterest
Mm,
and that you weren't in your current home at that stage.
no,
So, is that right?
no,
Were you styling your former home initially, like when you first joined Instagram, or did you only start like the actual kind of sort of taking
yeah.
photos of your own space? Was that what in your former home or
So
this one?
so the first house that my husband and I bought together, I definitely made my mark on that house as much as possible. We didn't do any big renovating, but it was my first chance to my biggest focus was the kids' room. The boys shared a bedroom, and I kind of went to town on decorating that. But I wasn't anywhere near the stage of doing styling and photography or anything. That definitely came later. When we built and I started the blog, we were actually renting, and so that was I always what I found interesting was that sort of contrast of living in sort of this rundown rental property and creating beautiful mood boards and you know my bringing my vision to life. And then I had so many dreams of what I wanted our new house to be, but it was really very simple, and it just became but it had, our house has beautiful light and a beautiful feel to it, but it was very, very simple design. And it, but I wanted somewhere that could be a place for me to experiment and to practice my styling and, be a playground, I guess, and it's just sort of a studio, which is what it became. And I just started playing around with products and obviously furnishing the house and doing my own interior design. And then it became a little bit more serious when I started working with brands and actually making sort of more of it more in a freelance capacity, I guess. Working with brands and creating content for the blog and Instagram. Yeah.
And so at what point did you start to I'm presuming you do use a professional camera, don't you?
Yes,
Like
I
a
do. I
DSLR.
do use a
So at
Canon
what
DSLR. Yeah, but I didn't
yeah.
have that initially. I think I had my little point and shoot. I couldn't even tell you what it is now. I mean, I look back at my photography and I cringe at the, the photos. I'm actually quite proud of how far I've come, and I think it is all part of the process and part of evolving and learning. And even when I first got my camera, I was so excited, but we had such beautiful natural light that I think I just had it on manual setting for a long time before I actually, started to learn about the technical side of the camera and how to use it. And so I'm lucky because I've worked with some amazing photographers like Lisa Cohen in Australia and top interior photographers in New Zealand. And so I've been able to sort of learn from that. And one of my very close friends, Kirsty Dawn, is a photographer, and she's been really, really helpful as well with tips. But it is just it's the sort of thing that you've just got to get in and do, and just practice and trial and error. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And what did you do a course, or did
no.
you just YouTube, or what did
Oh
you do? How
gosh,
did you
I've
learn?
spent hours watching YouTube videos, especially for Photoshop. Just painful, but you sort of have to, everything's sort of at your fingertips in terms of what you can learn. But I do just think it's been a lot of trial and error and just practice, 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 and honing in on my style. I think I have a natural eye for design and composition and angles and that sort of thing. But yeah, in terms of how to actually work a camera and edit photos, it's just a lot of YouTube videos and yeah, there's lots of information out there. So I never really thought, oh, I'm going to study this or take a course. I'm just going to see how I go. And it's also following people who inspire you and learning from them is so helpful. Because when you're visual, you're good at copying, I guess, and that's what you do is you see a photo and you think, how can I create something like that, with light and composition. So it's very intuitive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say that you're like a techie person? Like you're good with tech in
Um,
general, or
I
how would you describe
I
yourself?
think I think there is an element of that. I think that people who use social media for their work and juggle apps and blogs, and I think there is definitely, you kind of have to have a general knowledge and sort of affinity with tech, I think. But it's not it's probably not my strongest point either. Um, so yeah.
So there's hope for all of us.
There definitely is. Yeah, I know. It's like I always used to joke and say, my husband works in IT, and I'd joke and say, "Oh, behind every good blogger is an IT husband or IT partner." But in reality, he's so busy with his own work that I've just sort of been left to figure things out. Sure, he's there if I have, a problem that needs fixing, but it's just you just learn as you go. Yeah, you just got to get in there and do it. Yeah.
It's so true.
Mm.
So I guess one of the things that I'm really curious about as well is when you first started sharing on Instagram and also, I guess, with your blog, did you have a clear idea that you only wanted it to be about your interiors and your style? Because obviously with Instagram, I mean, there's some people who share lots to do with their family. There are some people who,
Yeah.
share a mix of both. Or did you did you used to do a bit more of that and now you're more about just being about interiors? Like,
Mm.
how have you kind of decided what you want your focus to be on?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, and I feel that perhaps I've lacked some consistency in that area. I do feel like I've gone through different stages. I mean, it's been 8 years, and you do evolve, and I also think it probably comes down to privacy, which may sound unusual in that I'm sort of sharing images of my home, but it's a very curated, edited version of life. I'm quite private when it comes to my kids and sharing their lives. And as they get older, they don't really want, a camera in their face. And I always ask their permission and whether they're happy for me to share a photo of them, that sort of thing, which is very rare. So I think it has changed. When they were little, I perhaps did a little bit more of that. But as they've gotten older and as I've moved through my career and evolved, I guess I've taken more of a professional sort of stance on it, where I want to share my work and the work of others that inspire me rather than sort of personal elements of my life along the way. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And
Mm.
did you ever want to do sort of styling? Because obviously, again, like with
Mhm.
styling, you can go down the path of working for lots of clients. And I know
Mm.
you do within your own home, but
Yeah.
you're not kind of doing lots of studio work, are you,
No, so
really?
I would like to be doing more. It's quite challenging in New Zealand, I think. It's a very small market. And it's really interesting at the moment because, we've had, and I know you've experienced this in Australia, but, had a lot of magazine closures with the pandemic. there's a lot of, I guess, young people coming up, or people who are out of work who are looking for work in the area of content creation. And then there's sort of people who work on a more, I guess, commercial level, and doing magazine shoots and brand campaigns and campaign imagery and that sort of thing. So there's perhaps just not enough work to go around, I would say, and it is quite challenging in that respect. I don't think it's something. I think to do that sort of work full time is almost impossible. So everyone's sort of juggling different things, which I think is perfectly normal. And yeah, I'd like to be doing more of that. I have done magazine shoots and worked with brands, and I've styled, I guess, done some residential styling and styling of office spaces and that sort of thing. But I do find that it's a time consuming process as well. I remember talking to a photographer about that. We did a 2-day shoot for a brand in New Zealand, and there's a lot of work involved. I'm on the day itself, I'm really in my element in terms of styling, and I just love it when everything comes together. But of course, there's so much work to get to that point in terms of sourcing product, or sourcing the studio space and everything as well. So yeah, you sort of come out of it quite exhausted, and I think to do that every week would be quite demanding, quite exhausting. So yeah, it's about a balance. And I think also with the blog, that's something that I have kept going the whole time. And that's also quite time consuming in terms of, you know, the research and the writing and keeping up with social media. Yeah. So it's a bit of a juggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about then also like styling versus doing interior design? Have you ever thought about going more down that way, or do you get requests for people to for you to do their homes, or is it more styling? That's where you feel like you've got your affinity.
Yeah, well, that's a really good question as well, and it's definitely something that I've thought about. I did did sort of dabble with some residential styling early on. I felt like that was just a really natural progression, and in the end, I actually pulled away from that, and I didn't find it as enjoyable as I'd hoped. I was sort of going to visit people locally and working sort of via email and doing sort of e-design, and yeah, I felt like I sort of preferred to be working on more of a commercial area and styling for products and brands. So that's sort of what my focus has been on. And then recently, yeah, I've definitely, I've had a lot of time to reflect this year, especially being in lockdown for a long time, that sort of thing. And I have thought about moving into interior design, and I do really love helping people, perhaps more in the sort of consultancy capacity if they're sourcing product, that sort of thing. I think in terms of doing big interior design projects, um, it would be an interesting process. I worked on a styling project earlier this year where it was it wasn't just sourcing product for a shoot, they were actually purchasing product for the offices, finishing touches and furniture and that sort of thing. And I really enjoyed that. Usually with styled shoots, it's very fast, and your products are borrowed and they're returned the next day. And so it was a nice process, and that it felt more of a more permanent. And I did really like that. It sort of got me thinking. But my direction this year has sort of changed again, in that I'm starting, I'm working on some other things in terms of a product and a new brand. So I've decided to focus on that, and we'll see where that goes. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's exciting.
thank you.
So, how do you decide what brands to work with? I'm sure you get deluged with requests. Like,
hmm
what's your, I guess, what's true to you, and what feels right and authentic for you to be working with?
Yeah, that's really important. That something that I've learned along the way is, yeah, to say no and yes to brands that are like-minded, that you feel yeah, a real synergy with. And I love Nordic design, so I guess it's a no-brainer if a brand comes to me and that's their specialty. But it's also about quality craftsmanship and sustainable design, and yeah, those are really the main things. There are brands that come to you that, yeah, it's just not the right fit, and so, yeah, you just have to be honest and, follow your gut. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, how do you say no? Because sometimes that
Good.
can be one of the hardest things, isn't
It
it?
really
Like
is.
to
I
sort of say
remember,
it in a nice
it
way.
really is. There was one point where I had just so many bedding companies coming to me, and they're all lovely in there as well. It wasn't even that they weren't perhaps the right fit. It was just that I think to be authentic, uh, you need to, it works better to work with a select few rather than be promoting every single bedding brand out there. And I had at the time a couple of really loyal, brands that I'm loyal to that had been advertising with me for a long time. And I had done some content creation. And so I think I just had to say, look, this is an area where I do get a lot of interest and a lot of brands coming to me. And so I have to, make that decision to select those that are the very best fit for TDC. And I think people respond, they respect that, and they appreciate that you've been honest with them. And it may not be a no forever, but it's a no right now. So it might be that you keep them in mind for, future work or future opportunities. But it is a hard one if it's a definite no, and you just really, I think you just have to be straight up with people, and they appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And your style is obviously very distinctive. I mean, this sort of, like you say, this Nordic
Mm.
influence style. Where does that come from? I mean, I know you said that your dad was into like more of the colors and the patterns. Where do you think
Um,
that interest came to, or what's the attraction for you?
it's really hard to pinpoint where that came from. I think I can't really name, one particular thing in my life that made me go, "Oh, that's the style I want to follow." It was more just a process of looking, like I said, when I started on Pinterest, and that was what I was drawn to for whatever reason. I just love that the more of a pared back style where things, there's a reduction, and it's about things being surrounded by things that you love rather than clutter and excess, but also space, creating spaces that are really livable and warm with texture and natural elements. So that just really, really appeals to me. I just feel like that's so me. That's hard to say why. Yeah.
No, that's good. And one of the things I have to ask as well is, I mean, obviously, I sort of work as a stylist as well,
Yeah.
and I know that when you're working with brands, you get given a lot of
Mhm.
products, and there can be points where you can, I mean, your home is obviously more pared back, but you're getting all this
Mm.
product. How do you go through that process of like keeping, I guess, stuff under control within your own home um, and just kind of maintaining that sort of simplicity within
Yeah.
your space? And I guess also I have to ask as well, like, so how old are your children,
Mhm.
and how do you maintain this kind of clutter-free home
Mm.
with having a family as well? Because it's one thing to do it for a photo shoot
Yeah.
and another thing to live like that.
Yeah, the boys, so they're 10 and 13. As of a couple of weeks ago, I've got a teenager in the house, so that's been interesting. But I think they learnt from quite a young age that, that was the way mummy liked to live, and especially with building a new home, and they adapted really well to that, and they've sort of followed those rules of, not eating in the living room and that sort of thing. And we always eat dinner together at the dining table, and they eat breakfast up at the kitchen island. And there's just that they love routine, and there's, I don't think it's cruel or anything like that. It's just those are the rules of the household, and they sort of adapt to that. Our youngest is he's messy as anything. His room is always just such a mess. He has to keep on him. Whereas Roman, our eldest, is a little bit more. I feel like it's rubbed off on him a little bit more, and he likes things to be quite orderly and tidy. So it's not too bad, and I think it has definitely gotten easier as they've gotten older. Um, but yeah, in terms of sort of excess product, there is, there has been a lot of that over the years, and I do give away a lot. We've taken a lot to hospice. I also have some space in our garage where I call, our props cupboard, where I keep things. I think in New Zealand, as a stylist, you need to be quite resourceful. So I'm a little bit hesitant to let go of things, as I can't always create the spaces I want to create because we just don't have access to the design. Or, if you're working on a shoot and you need things straight away, you don't sort of have the luxury of time of waiting for shipments and things to arrive. So I tend to be quite resourceful and reuse things and repurpose things and try and find ways of I guess styling things in different ways, whether it's just dried flowers or objects or things that I love. So I do tend to hold on to probably more things than I need to. Um, but and I'm definitely more conscious, of saying to people, look, I don't, thank you, but no thank you. I don't, if it's not something I really love that I really want or need for my home, then I'll say no, unless it's a paid, collaboration where you can give the product back. Yeah, I'm more conscious of that too.
Mm. And so can you sort of give us a little bit of an insight into your home journey as well? So
Mhm.
you said that you designed it, did you, the home from kind of scratch almost, or can you just share about a little bit about that process and I guess what you wanted to achieve with the home
Mhm.
and how it's evolved over time? So it sounds like you've been in that particular home for quite a while now. Is that right?
Yeah, so we must have been here for about 7 years, I think, which has gone incredibly fast when I think about it. So we worked with a boutique building company. So they sourced the land for us. It was a subdivided section, and we wanted to build in. Back then, it was all about school zones, and we love living here in Meadowbank. It's a really beautiful suburb. We're surrounded by mature trees, and we're down a driveway, which is really private. I never wanted to be down a driveway. I always loved, street front. I was actually really torn because I grew up in sort of like 100-year-old bungalow, and I loved the idea of renovating an older property. But my husband was really keen on building new. He had had a lot of allergies growing up and living in damp homes. And gosh, now I know that I was the same actually. I flattered in some like horrendous places where I was really sick and it was really damp. And so I think it was one of the best decisions we ever made for the health of our children and just, yeah, living in a dry, new build home. So we worked with a boutique property uh, building company, and they have an arc. They do the design for you. And like I remember the first meeting I had, I said, no, I'm not happy with that. I want the bedrooms upstairs, not downstairs. And they explained that this was the best layout for the light, and they were so right. It really is just has been designed so well, and everyone who walks into our house says, wow, it just has a beautiful feel to it. And um, I worked on the interior design. I did work with a kitchen designer because it was such an important element to get right. I wanted that to really be sort of the hub of our home and create as much space and storage as I could with what we were working with. But yeah, everything else, I just had a vision of bringing a beautiful light-filled Nordic home to life, and yeah, I feel like I achieved that. But it has evolved quite a lot over time, for sure. Yeah, there's been a lot of changes in terms of. I've started to, we when we first built it was very all white, the interior, and I've started to introduce some softer colours, just greige and beige tones, which I really love. And yeah, I'll probably just end up doing more and more of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you love most about the house in terms of the design? So you've mentioned the light, capturing
Yeah.
the
So
light, but what are some
upstairs,
of the other things?
yeah, sorry, upstairs it's an open plan space. So we have our living area, dining and kitchen, and that leads out to a small deck area. And we have a huge Bahutakawa tree outside, so it really has a beautiful treehouse feel. And because it's elevated and it gets the light, afternoon light is just beautiful. So that's definitely my favourite part of our house. Um, I'm lucky to have a little office space which is sort of tucked away a bit, and then downstairs we have our bedrooms and a second living area, which is That's probably the space that has evolved the most. When we first moved in, we were a bit unsure about what to do with that space, and we ended up having the kids' desks down there. And then it sort of changed again, and it wasn't really used as a family space so much. And I had a day bed down there, which I loved, but it wasn't really being used. So over time, I've changed the area, just made it more livable and more, I guess, a little bit more grown up as well in terms of furniture and putting down some wooden flooring, because it's all carpeted downstairs. But I just love the idea of having that space with some wooden flooring. So um, I had to really twist my husband's arm with that, but got there in the end. Yeah. So
Does he have a similar aesthetic to you, or what kind of compromises have to be made along the way? Because I mean, obviously, you're in a family home,
yeah,
and it's one thing to create a beautiful space in a studio,
yeah,
but this is your home, and so not only with your children, but
yeah.
yeah, your husband too.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm lucky that we are definitely on the same page when it comes to most things. That's probably been the biggest thing, because he actually wanted to carpet the whole house to begin with, and I said no, that's not going to work with my whole Scandinavian design, my vision. I need wooden flooring, so we decided to do, well, yeah, I got that past the line, and we did the whole top floor and wooden flooring, and the downstairs, apart from the bathrooms which were tiled, we did carpet. And so yeah, I just really wanted to, put down some wooden flooring downstairs, and that was, finally got there. But in terms of overall, I think we're definitely on the same page. He likes things to be quite pared back and not too cluttered. And he doesn't ever really. He's just, I guess, he just trusts me and what I'm doing, and he's always really happy with when I new things appear at home. He's always really happy. I try to get him involved, and I've done some sort of collaborations, with new sofas and things. We'll go and test them out together, or a new mattress or whatever. But sort of, yeah, things like that. But yeah, he does trust my judgment, and he's happy with the things that I choose. So that works out well.
Yeah.
And the kids are the same, actually. They get excited about things. Um, so that's really nice, because it's our house it's our sort of haven, and I want it to be somewhere that we all enjoy. So it would be awful if they weren't happy with what I had created, but yeah, they love it. It's so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. So, can you give me a little bit of an insight into a day in the life, like
Hmm.
what you do? And I mean, obviously, I realize tonight, right now, the world is a little bit different
Yeah.
to how it might have been 6 months ago. But
Mm.
let's kind of, suspend reality a little
Yeah,
bit,
sure.
and how do you normally work? Like, do you, and I guess it's not even just a day, but like, do you batch content? How do you work? Like, what's your work process and workflow?
So, oh gosh, every day is different, because I feel like, especially this year, I've started working on a few different projects, which I'm really enjoying. But I think that it's been a bit of a learning curve, because I am the sort of person who I sort of focus on one thing, and that becomes all consuming. And so to jump around to different things, it's been, yeah, quite an adjustment. In saying that, there always has been a little bit of that, because I might spend, some of my day writing and researching and doing blog work, and then I get away from my computer and I get to have a play and do styling and photography, which I love. I often feel like I love breaking away and doing that, and I try and do that as much as possible. But yeah, typical day. So there's not really a typical day. I remember there was last Friday, for example, was just there was a lot going on. So that's probably a good example. I remember I had a Zoom meeting in the morning with a company in Wellington with um, this brand, this new project that I'm working on, and an element of that we were finalizing some ideas for. And then I had to do some test shots for some 3D models of a product, a design collaboration that I'm working on. So I wanted to get those photos done. And then I had, um, in the afternoon, was working with a brand they were launching, and I'd done an interview with the designer for my blog. And of course, often I'm dealing with people who live on the other side of the world. So it was all about, we had sort of decided on a time to launch. And I know the kids finished school and I took them to skate school, and then I came home and I had that ready to publish. And then that evening I had my social media to do, because again, I usually do that in the evening. So my day is, what I love about it is that I can work around the kids and schooling and do afternoon activities with them, but it often means working at night as well. So I wouldn't have it any other way. But yeah, so the days are, it's a juggle. It's jumping from one thing to the next quite often. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love it.
And are you one of those people that sort of burns the midnight oil, or do you have quite clear boundaries with yourself about, how long you spend on Instagram or how long you spend on Pinterest or whatever, all the different things that you do?
No, I definitely burn the midnight oil. Um, yeah, probably to the detriment of my health at times and getting burnt out. But I think it's the nature of what I do. My husband's a night owl as well. We both tend to sort of get into that routine of, when the kids go to bed and they're going to bed later as they get older, that's sort of our time. And we might, watch a bit of Netflix, but we might have our laptops and be doing a bit of work as well. That's sort of what we do. We're not so much morning people. So yeah, I think that's just the sort of routine and sort of rhythm that I've fallen into. And I do try and have more structure, especially on the weekends. I really try and shut the door to my office, because it can become more consuming. And I think with blogging, it's hard because you do need to sort of get a head start often on a Sunday and prepare for the week ahead. I'm not that organized where I've got everything scheduled in the week before or weeks in advance. I'm not that way inclined. And I think that's what I've always loved about blogging, is that it is more ad hoc. It's not a magazine where you've got deadlines and you have to get everything ready to go to print. It's something can come across your desk in the morning and you can have that up on the blog within a couple of hours, or later that day. And I love that about blogging. So yeah, that's how I work. It's not hugely structured.
Yeah. And so how often do you blog? Is it daily or weekly, or
Well,
and is it consistent?
it's not so much these days. I mean, it's actually something. So when I first started blogging, yes, it was 6 days a week, and then after perhaps a couple of years, I thought, no, I sort of saw the light and thought, no, that this is just too much. So I started blogging Monday to Friday, and I did that for a long time. And then as I picked up, more freelance style work and styling work, I just found I couldn't keep that up. So, and also, getting, busy with family life and everything else, I think I dropped down to about 4 days a week. A good week, I'd still blog 5 days a week, but often it was four. And then over the last few months, because I've been working on other projects, it's sort of dropped again. And I think that's okay. I think, you know, I'm trying to spend more time, doing interviews and actually, quality. It's more about quality than quantity. And that's really what I'm weighing up, is rather than sort of scrambling to find something to share on my blog, I'd rather just take the time and post something that I love rather than, something that I've seen that's all around the web already. I'd rather create something that's a little bit more special, and share that with my readers.
Yeah. And so on that idea of like batching content, I mean, I presume that that's something that you do with your styling and photography. Is that something that you do?
In terms of doing it sort of all at once and
Yeah,
yeah.
like so, you sort of like photograph different
Mm.
areas and then share it at different times
Not
on Instagram, for
not so
instance.
much. I have done that sometimes in the past, but and it depends. Like, for example, if I am working, with a new product and starting photographing that, then it may be obviously a case of doing a series of photos, and in which case, yeah, that would be shared at different times. But day-to-day styling, no, it's very much just
Mm.
what I'm doing at the time. It's been really challenging this year because styling work has really slowed down, and there just haven't been the opportunities, and people obviously, yeah, with the pandemic, it's been challenging even just with day-to-day styling. And I'm itching to get back into the studio and do some things outside of home. I feel like it's a little bit like Groundhog Day, where you're thinking, oh, what am I going to do today? It's been challenging in that respect. Yeah.
So you're telling me that your home looks like this most of the time then, or if not all of the time?
Oh, in
Yeah?
terms of very curated and
Well, it's yeah, and it's ready to shoot, kind
no,
of.
no, not at all. It's a gosh, no, no, don't be silly. It's a no. I
Well,
mean,
some
look,
people are. It's
I know. I'm sure there's people that do live like that, and I really admire them, and I wish I could. But no, it's definitely it's a constant work in progress. I think I'd have to be doing housework sort of all day, every day to keep it like that. I try and do, the big sort of tidy up once a week, but to be honest, I really don't enjoy housework. It's not something that I love doing, but I do. It's the payoff because I do like to live in a tidy, uncluttered sort of space. So, but yeah, in terms of styling, it takes a lot of work, because things clutter does build up very, very quickly, and often it's my own clutter. Like I said, I'm working on different things, so there'll be 3D models on the dining table, and samples here and sample things there, and yeah, it's just constantly tidying up. I do love our Roomba, our iRobot vacuum cleaner. That is one of the best things we've ever got, because you can just let it go and get on with other things. So yeah, I do love that.
maybe I need to invest in one
I
of those.
definitely, I definitely recommend it. Yeah, you need to do it, Natalie.
So just give us like a little bit of an insight. So then, like the posts that you've done this week so far, like would they have been shot? Like when were they shot, for instance? Are they shot last week, or on that day, or how does that work?
I just have to think about what I've done this week, actually. It's been a funny old week, having gone into lockdown again
Or on a
yesterday.
sort of like on a typical week,
Yeah.
like is it?
So I think that ideal scenario is that I, sh- something inspires me on that day, or I'm working on something that day that I can share that evening. I feel like that's really authentic, but it's just not realistic when you're, working full time and you have family and everything. I generally do, um, have like some photos set aside that I have taken in the past. And, or winter I find is really challenging. We just never know what the weather's doing from one day to the next in terms of light and rain and everything. So it's nice to have those, a few photos up your sleeve that you can bring out and, think back to a sunnier day or whatever. So yeah, it is a real mix. But I think yesterday I did, we were just readjusting to kids being home again and my husband working from home, and it was kind of nice just to do a bit of styling downstairs, in the space, and get out my camera, and the light was sort of playing ball. So yeah, that's a nice thing to do. Yeah, it's just do a bit of styling at home and take a photo, and it feels really authentic to
Yeah.
share.
So I've got to ask you,
Mm.
do you have any tips or tricks to share, like on either styling or photography or Instagram, or maybe one for all three? What some of the big things that you've learnt?
Um, in terms of styling, I think for me, like I said, it is very intuitive, and I do, to a certain extent, I have, natural eye for, composition and light and stuff. But I think that I I love to. There's certain elements that I love to include. I usually I love textural elements and sensory elements, and I think also showing a little bit of yourself. So it's nice to, I don't know, whether it's something that you've made or something secondhand that you've found, or a quirky object or something sentimental. It's really nice to include that in your styling, because so often we see these beautiful spaces, and especially when you follow people, like-minded people, um, we tend to have, you see the same sort of products and the same look and the same style popping up all the time. So I think it's nice to find something that is unique to you and your style. So I do try and do that. And like I said, just being resourceful, I always have lots of dried flowers around the house. If I don't get a chance to get fresh flowers, or go outside, and see what you can find and forage, and that's always fun. So yeah, that would probably be my tip for styling and photography. Like I said, I just love, natural light, play around with capturing shadow play on the wall, or different times of the day and light. I think it adds a really beautiful element, and it's kind of got me through, to be honest, this year, because I'm always chasing the light, because I feel like I'm just, you're doing the same thing over and over again, with your home. And so it's a really nice way to show something different, is, oh wow, the lights changed today. And downstairs we have, these lime wash walls, which are just amazing because they have a natural texture anyway, but they look different throughout the day in different lights. So it's a constant kind of playground. I really love shooting down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about with Instagram? Are there any kind of like apps that you use, or and like even how you create your grid? What sort of things do you keep in mind?
Um, Gosh, I'm probably not that strategic when it comes to that. Although, I mean, I do look at the overall composition of my grid, and I like there to be consistency to an extent. I think, there are some people that just do it remarkably well, and then I think, wow, they just, every photo is so consistent in terms of light, and that's just not going to be the case for me, because, like I said, I like to play around with different light. And it's a place where I share my own styling, but also how I'm evolving and growing and learning. So my photography has improved so much over time, so it keeps changing. Uh, but yeah, definitely, I wouldn't post the same room every day. I try and mix it up, in different areas, you know, different, perhaps a pulled back shot or a room, and then maybe a flat lay or a close up shot. I also sometimes share my blog work, if there's a space, usually a really inspiring space that I would share, that just is, wow, I want to share that with my readers, because I think, I really admire people who only share their own work on Instagram, but it's also nice to see what inspires people outside of that. I think that's quite an important element. So that's something that I'd like to share as well from time to time. I usually share mostly I share that on my stories though, and try and stick with my own sort of content creation on Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, great. All right, before you go, I
Yeah.
do have some quick questions
Okay.
to ask you. So unfortunately, the hardest question is sort of the first, because people always think, but anyway, just whatever comes to mind. Don't overthink of it, and if you can't think of five, don't worry.
Okay.
So, which five words best describe you?
Okay. I'm driven. I'm resilient. I think all those years of ballet taught me that. Creative. I'm also loyal. I'm really loyal to, people I love, and brands that I work with. How many is that?
Four.
um, what else am I? I'm also really empathetic. I feel things quite deeply. Um, yeah, that's something I've come to learn about myself, probably more so in recent years, and since I've had children, definitely.
Yes, me too. I
Yeah.
cry at
Oh,
everything.
it's
I never used to
terrible.
be a
Yeah.
crier.
And my son turning 13, I found that harder than when he started school for some reason. So,
Wow.
yeah.
My son's 12, so
Oh,
I've still
you're
got that to
nearly
go. I'm
there.
still holding on.
Yeah,
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 but almost there.
yeah.
What's the best life or career lesson you've learnt?
Oh, well, my father, I remember he always said to me, Michelle, find something you love, something you're passionate about, and it won't feel like work. It's a bit of a cliche, but I do believe that. But I also, what I've come to realize over the years is that, and in my work, is that it's not just about finding what you're interested in, um, but also what you're good at and what you can give back. It's about finding finding a way to help other people, I guess, and that's what I aim to do. Is I want to inspire people. So yeah, that's what I've learned.
What's your proudest career achievement?
There's been a lot of pinch me moments along the way. I've had some just amazing opportunities in terms of traveling overseas, and working with and visiting some design greats like Eric Jorgensen and George Jensen, and that's been incredible. But I'd say my greatest achievement is really just carving out a career doing what I love.
Yeah, that's great. Um, what's been your best decision?
Starting the blog, I think, just taking that leap of faith and yeah.
No, that's good. Nice and simple. Who inspires you?
Gosh, I'm inspired by so many people, stylists and architects around the world. And there's, every day I see projects and spaces on Instagram where I think, wow, that's just so incredibly inspiring. My saved folder is probably out of control, so many saves. But in saying that, I'm also really inspired by anyone who just follows their vision of, it might be something small, it might be one product, but they execute it really well with, it's really considered, and they do it with intent and sustainability. And I think that's really inspiring as well. Yeah.
Definitely. What are you passionate about?
Besides interiors and design, I'm passionate about my family. I'm passionate about equality and the future of our planet. And I'm also really passionate about being active. I think it's part of me, and it's so important that it's got me out of low points in my life. I know it's so important for my mental health, and even now, if I'm having a day where I feel a bit low, or just even just going for a walk will lift my spirits. It's just a really powerful thing that I want to keep doing as long as I possibly can. Yeah.
Yep, no, completely get that. I'm
Mm.
actually about to go for a surf after this
Oh
interview
wow, you
because it's
surf!
like,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
yes,
amazing.
I'm sort of learning,
Yeah.
but I've made a commitment to myself that I have to go 3 times a week because
Oh,
otherwise I'm just going to keep going backwards.
that's
So,
brilliant.
um, yeah,
Oh, good
so,
for
but I
you.
completely get that.
I hope you share that on Instagram. I'd love to see.
No way.
Oh, mm.
What dream do you still want to fulfill?
Um, the product, yeah, moving into a product and a design collaboration. That was my goal for this year. It's still to be fulfilled, but I'm working on it. Yeah. So it's
Yeah,
been a slow
great. Can't
process
wait to
this
see it.
year with everything that's happened, but we're getting there.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's probably going to end up for the best,
I hope so.
so
I hope
yeah,
so.
for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Um, what are you reading at the moment?
I've usually got a few things on the go. I love fiction. I find I love the escapism of fiction. In fact, my sister just gave me her Kindle recently. We have a shared account and she reads a lot as well. And I think there's about 300 books on there. So that's been
Wow.
amazing. But in terms of design, I'm actually reading the Aesop book. I don't know if you've read it. It's a
Ah,
beautiful book. And I
no.
had it for a while. It's sort of like a coffee table book. And I finally got to it in the last couple of weeks. And I love, the way they create their stores. It's just fascinating because they don't follow a template, like a lot of brands do. It's about paying respect to the cities and the neighborhoods where they create their stores, and they work with amazing architects. And there's usually a really interesting starting point for each store. Like it might be a connection to the neighborhood and the history, or an artwork or something. So each store tells a different story, and they're all just so beautiful and inspiring. So it's yeah, I'm really enjoying it. Beautiful photography
Oh,
as well. Yeah, I recommend it.
yeah, I have to get that because I
Yeah.
love what they've done. I mean, they're so clever,
Aren't
so
they?
thoughtful,
Yes.
and yeah, I'm always impressed with whatever they create. So I
Yeah.
must get that.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Um, what are you listening to at the moment? Are you listening to any podcasts or
I'm
what kind of
listening well, I'm
music?
listening to your podcast at the moment, which I'm
Oh,
really enjoying. There's another one which I'm sure you know, is by Athena Calderon, I Swoon. It's called Not Just One Thing, I think.
yeah,
That's a really
yeah,
good
more than
one.
one thing. Yeah.
I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I feel like I need more hours in the day because I do a lot of reading, and I listen to music when I'm exercising, and when I'm writing, I need silence. So yeah, I'd like to listen to more podcasts. I know I keep lists, and there's lots on my list that I need to work through. I'll get there. I will get there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because I got 4 children, so I've got a lot of laundry.
Oh,
So that's I think why I get through so
oh,
many.
I bet.
And finally, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
I would say always follow your gut. Don't underestimate what you can achieve if you put your mind to it. And don't worry so much about what other people think. And don't sweat the small stuff. Yeah.
That is all so true and so good. Thank you so much, Michelle. I've so enjoyed chatting to you and learning more about your sort of story and your process. It's it's been really fascinating and interesting. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
All right, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this interview. I'd love to know what you think. So please write a review wherever you're listening to this podcast today. And please also subscribe and spread the love with your friends and on social media. You'll find show notes for this episode at nataliewalton.com/podcast/21, because this is episode 21. Thank you to Jaeger Media for producing this podcast and the people of the Bundjalung Nation where it was recorded. Thanks again for joining me today, and I really look forward to connecting again with you soon. I'm Natalie Walton, and you've been listening to Imprint.